Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes, going to look to finish strong in the spring transfer portal window. And we got a new target that is emerging for the Miami Hurricanes. That is former JUCO defensive lineman Jaquan McInny, who committed to Arkansas State in the winter. Now back in the spring transfer portal, getting legitimate Power Four buzz. Now, what does Jaquan McInny bring to Miami? That's the first conversation I want to have, but I want to, kind of get into a little bit more of an overarching conversation in terms of what Miami has done up until this point in the spring portal window. What are the last remaining names to talk about or at least know for Miami in the spring portal as well? Before we get into it, as always, the Miami Hurricane fans, y'all let it fly in the comment section. I'm going to give you guys my takes on the AJ Halsey situation as well. Would love to hear how you guys are feeling in the comment section, and would love to hear the grade that you would give to Mario Cristobal and Miami up until this point in terms of what they've done in the spring transfer portal window. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We say this all the time to the Miami fans. It's been really fun talking this football team. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, let's start with, what Miami maybe still wants to address heading into 2025. And, kind of an under the radar storyline for Miami is depth in the middle of the defensive line. I think Miami had two glaring positions they wanted to address, at the wide receiver position and at the safety position. That kind of took up a lot of the, airspace, you might say, in terms of what we talked about over the last couple of weeks. The middle of the defensive line has been a position that I think Mario Cristobal wanted to address as well. Now, you're asking me why I think that. You scroll over to the Miami Hurricanes depth chart and say, look, we love the talent that Mario Cristobal has stacked in the middle of the defensive line. Like, you're going to reap the rewards of what you have created on the recruiting trail, winning out for Justin Scott, winning out for Artavius Jones. We expect those two guys to take a big time step going into year two of their college football careers. You landed David Blay. You know what you have with Ahmad Moten. That's four names that I think Miami feels pretty good about. When you're a team that wants to compete for a conference championship, when you're a team that wants to compete in the college football playoffs, of which should be the conversation with Miami. Like, you look at this roster, we should be talking college football playoffs with the roster that they've put together. You probably want five or six, and I think we're at four. Now, Donta Simpson was arguably the biggest winner in spring practice. He's a guy that could give you some solid snaps in the middle of that defensive line. You're probably looking for one more name, and that's probably what Jaquan McInny brings to the table. Now, I don't know a ton about this kid because I don't watch JUCO level football. I did go back to the huddle and look at the 2024 season at Hutchinson up there in Iowa. There's a lot to like in terms of the dirty work this kid can do. 6'3", 300 pounds, kind of that fire hydrant build, you might say. I don't think he's going to be an elite pass rusher. That pass rush production is probably going to come from guys like Justin Scott or Ruben Bain on the outside or Hayden Lowe or Akeem Mesidor. But, as a run-stopping interior defensive lineman that can play the nose, that can play the three tech, do some dirty work, I think Jaquan McInny could be that answer. Now, this is not a guy you bring in to play 40 to 50 snaps a game. That's what David Blay and Justin Scott and Ahmad Moten are for. But can you get a guy that can be a solid rotational piece for 10 to 15 snaps a game? That's probably what Miami is looking for. I think Jaquan McInny could be that guy. And you probably, if you add a guy like Jaquan McInny, you probably feel pretty good about the depth that Miami has. Now, one other conversation I'll say about the interior defensive line as it relates to the depth of the team, you got a couple of guys that can probably kick on the inside, especially in pass rush situations. Akeem Mesidor, even a guy like Ruben Bain, or even a guy like Armando Blunt. When you're talking about third and long pass rush situations, you probably can move some of those bigger, heavier-handed edge rushers to the inside at times if you want to. I look at 3rd and 8. What would 3rd and 8 look like for Miami? It might look like Hayden Lowe on the field, Ruben Bain on the field, Armando Blunt and Justin Scott, and like one of those guys playing at the 3 tech position. that normally plays out on the edge. You land Jaquan McInny, I think you feel pretty good about the depth in the defensive line. And quite frankly, even if you don't land Jaquan McInny, you probably feel decent about it. You probably feel better if you land a guy like Jaquan McInny. And another one of those body types that I think would fit what Miami wants to do. Now, the other position I think of concern is probably still that safety position. And what I would throw out there, I think Miami's plan was always to take two. I think AJ Halsey was always the top target, you might say. But I think Miami was always going to take two. You landed Jacoby Thomas, a guy that's played a lot of football that you kind of trust back there. Can you maybe circle back on Gregory Smith? Like, I think with AJ Halsey and the heat that Miami put on AJ Halsey, we kind of tossed Gregory Smith to the side. This is a guy that when he hit the portal, we all thought he was going to Miami immediately. Obviously, the Will Harris connection as well. That kind of tempered off. I think the expectation was that he was going to go to North Carolina. Hasn't signed anywhere. And I don't think he visited Purdue this weekend. I don't think he would have visited Purdue if he felt good about North Carolina. All this to say, hey, Gregory Smith's recruitment is probably still open. And with Miami missing out on AJ Halsey on Sunday night, maybe a spin back to Gregory Smith. And I personally would be a very big fan of this. Why would I be a big fan? He's not necessarily the proven commodity that AJ Halsey is. This kid has some real upside. I mean, you look at his athletic profile coming out of high school. He was a guy that spent most of his time playing quarterback at the high school ranks. 6'3", 215 pounds, 6'9" wingspan, elite jumping metrics in the track and field. This kid's athletic profile is really, really special. He has a ceiling similar to AJ Halsey. We just have not seen it yet. You land Jacoby Thomas, that kind of like steady Eddie safety that's not going to be a first-team All-ACC guy, but provides a lot of experience, some much-needed experience at the safety position. Why not go supplement it with a guy like Gregory Smith, who really could wind up having some real upside for Miami, not only in 2025, but over the next couple of years? This kid can play. And again, we haven't seen it fully come together because he was a true freshman last year. I'm confident that he can be a really good football player at some point, maybe even immediately for Miami in 2025. With AJ Halsey off the board, I wonder if Miami circles back and Gregory Smith. Look, at the end of the day, if Miami wants to make this kid a priority, they're beating out North Carolina. They're beating out Purdue for the services of Gregory Smith. They ain't no doubt in my mind. We'll see if Miami circles back to Gregory Smith. Now, another name to watch is Keontae Scott. I'm not sure if this is a must get for Miami, but it's a kid that I quite frankly really like, because when you've seen him play nickel, he's a very good nickel defender. And what would it look like if Keontae Scott comes in to play nickel? Well, I would argue that maybe you have some more versatility with a guy like Damari Brown. Or maybe a guy like Jadias Richard, you can kind of kick some of them back to safety. Look, if you have a question mark at the safety position, I mean, you got a couple of really good cornerbacks that are probably going to struggle to find the football field because OJ Frederick and Xavier Lucas are so good. If you land a guy like Keontae Scott and really solidify your depth at all three cornerback positions, that is the boundary spots and the nickel spot, wonder if you could maybe get creative with Jadias Richard or Damari Brown, maybe kicking him back to safety. That's the question that I have with Keontae Scott, a guy that I think would play for Miami, a guy that when we've seen him play that nickel corner spot has been very, very good. Maybe not as good on the boundary, but very good at nickel. Look, the more the merrier for Miami in the secondary. I think a lot of Miami fans agree with that. Now, the last name to watch is Mohamed Tore from Rutgers. Penn State, Indiana, Miami. And I think the consensus is it's going to be between Penn State and Miami. Now, the storyline to watch here is North Carolina linebacker Amari Campbell. He's on campus at Penn State right now. I would be surprised if Penn State takes two linebackers. So they might take Amari Campbell over the next 48 hours. If that happens, I think you would consider Miami the lead dog for Mohamed Tore. I look at it and say that this would make a lot of sense. Like, provided he clears the medicals and he's had some struggles staying healthy, coming off a season-ending injury in 2024 where he missed a full year. Go back to this kid in 2023. Like, as a Big Ten guy, as a Michigan fan, I've watched a lot of Mohamed Tore over the last couple of years. A healthy Mohamed Tore is a very, very good linebacker. A healthy Mohamed Tore is the best linebacker that Miami has. I feel very confident saying that. Now, the first question is he healthy and ready to go in 2025? The other comment here is, when did Mohamed Tore play his best football? It was when Corey Heatherman was coaching them linebackers at Rutgers in 2023. Now, what fascinates me about Mohamed Tore is I think he's more than just an off-ball linebacker, right? 93 tackles, 10 TFLs, 4.5 sacks, 10% missed tackle rate. Really, really good season in 2023. This kid as a pass rusher has juice, has big time juice. Like, whether it's coming through the A or B gap, whether it's coming off the edge, this kid can pin his ears back, get after the passer. Had 17 quarterback hurries in the 2023 year with a 16% pass rush win rate. He's more than just a plug and play linebacker. I think this kid can be a difference maker for whatever team he's playing for in 2025, provided that he's healthy. There are still a couple of very intriguing names that I fully think would help this team immediately in 2025 that are still available. I think a lot of Miami fans might be writing the rest of the spring portal off because you missed out on AJ Halsey. We got some names to monitor over the next couple of days, kind of evaluating where Miami sits. Again, I've been I just think they've done as good of a job as they could, right? You go ahead and add Tony Johnson and Keelan Marion, like two guys that are, much needed veteran pass catchers in a young wide receiver room. I think Malachi Tony very well could beat out Tony Johnson on this depth chart. I just kind of plug and play Tony Johnson because he's played more. Tramar Brown, running back 3, like sneaky, really good get that provides you arguably the best 3D running back room that you see in the country. You couple that with the offensive line Miami has, you feel great about giving Carson Beck the run game. Then you go to the defensive side of the football and say, all right, you got your veteran safety. You got a proven linebacker in Kamal Bonner who's only getting better. You go out and land an interior defensive lineman, and it doesn't even need to be an elite one. Like we said from the jump, we're just looking for some depth at that position. You go out and land a guy with the upside that Gregory Smith has, or what Mohamed Tore has shown us when healthy. There are still players that I think would fundamentally change how I view Miami in 2025. We'll see what Miami decides to do. We all know Mario Cristobal likes to finish strong, whether it's in the portal, whether it's on the high school trail. We'll continue to update it as it goes on. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.